Sup guys? After yesterday's video, I was flooded with questions and I realized there is a lot of knowledge that I take for granted when discussing chapter 14. In this video, I'm going to address the most frequently asked questions about chapter 14 in the context of clearing it for the first time. Meaning that this will have nothing to do with auto search farming or 3-starring the stage. I understand that not everyone is starting with the same knowledge, but I hope that this will be helpful to some. Let's get started. The first question is, I don't have the equipment that you use in your videos. What should I use instead? My advice here is to go farm for the equipment. All the equipment that you need is permanently available through Gear Lab and research. Chapter 14 is probably the hardest content in the game. Would you also ask how you can one-shot a meta boss or arbiter without proper equipment? Equipment is almost as important as levels for ship performance. So asking how you can do the stage without proper equipment is pretty much akin to asking how you can do the stage with level 60 ships. If you're not ready, just take your time and gather the necessary equipment that you need. Chapter 14 only has New Orleans and it's not going anywhere. So with that question out of the way, I've probably filtered out all the people who can't be helped anyway. The second question is, if I'm lacking the equipment, what should I prioritize getting? This is a much more appropriate question. Rather than complaining about the problem, you should probably try to fix it. I'm not going to go in depth here about where to obtain each piece of equipment, and mostly talk about which equipment you should prioritize and which don't matter as much. Find out where to get them via the wiki. Let's look at the equipment I used in my last video. There are a few pieces of equipment that are a given, which you should have even without going into chapter 14. Rudders, toolboxes, beaver badge, shells, catapults. All of these are good in every part of the game, and all of it is accessible early on except for the rudder, which you can start getting as soon as you unlock research. There should be no reason you aren't able to equip 2 full fleets with these by the time you reach chapter 14. You don't even need 6 rudders, 12 catapults, and 6 sets of shells, because you can use destroyers which do fine with just toolboxes, and then mix carriers with battleships, cutting down the requirement of the total number of catapults and shells. Also, you should have one 457mm and one Tenrai from the Protocore shop, because they are top-end equipment that don't take a lot of effort to obtain and work fine at +10. I used a +13 Rainbow MK7 on Royal Oak. The +13 can be made up for by using +13 shells instead, which should easily be the first pieces of auxiliary you upgrade to +13. Seeing as how the New Jersey event just reran 2 weeks ago, if you don't have an MK7, then you'll have to find a way to make do. It's not a have or die situation, but if you didn't bother to pick up such a good piece of equipment, then you deserve to suffer a bit. Now, let's look at the more chapter 14 specific equipment. The Hedgehog is extremely important for escort nodes and also extremely easy to obtain. Getting it to +13 is not necessary, but definitely helpful. If you use it at +10, consider putting it on a ship with higher anti-submarine warfare stat, like Wakatsuki, Janus, Haman-2, and so on. Also, you should definitely pick up an anti-submarine plane for Unicorn if you're using a +10 Hedgehog. Next, you should get at least one Wyvern for Unicorn. Wyverns are mostly used in chapter 14, and is a huge upgrade in this stage over any other torpedo bombers. +13 is not needed, so you can invest your gold plates elsewhere. I used 3 Wyverns in my video, but if that's too much, you can easily replace Taiho with Saratoga, for example, who needs 0 Wyverns, and then you can replace Independence with another battleship, and voila, you don't need any more than 1 Wyvern. And after that, pretty much everything else that is relatively difficult to obtain is replaceable. All of the light cruiser guns will not make or break your clear. For the battleship ox guns, you can just use the triple 155mm that drop from Sakura boxes. For more interception without equipment, you can bring Odin, who doesn't need any secondary gun at all. For light cruisers, you'll want one of Seattle gun from Research, Chapayev gun from the Northern Overture Archive, or the triple 155mm Kai from the Gear Lab. But if you have more good heavy cruiser or destroyer guns, then you can by all means substitute the light cruisers with ships from other classes that fulfill similar roles. In terms of AA guns, rainbows and stags are nice to have but not important by any means. If you have gotten past chapter 13, just use the same AA guns as you did in chapter 13 and you'll do just fine. The torpedoes are all interchangeable. Whether they're magnetic or not matters very little in chapter 14, where there are always many enemies on the screen at the same time. All torpedoes will likely crash into something. The same goes for submarine torpedoes. Any gold ones you get from the submarine weekly will be good enough for the purpose of clearing chapter 14. After that, what do we have left? Fighters. All fighters that carry 1,000 pound bombs are interchangeable with each other in chapter 14. In particular, you might have Sea Hornets from past events, but otherwise pancakes are both the cheapest to craft and offer the best AA. Even if you don't have the material for 1,000 pound fighters, you'll do just fine using the Hellcats you can get from Eagle boxes. In terms of dive bombers, SB2C Helldivers will work just fine when you don't have 10 rise, and I'm pretty sure that covers everything. And I'll give you one last useful tip. Notice the equipment of Scylla and Kawakaze. Certain ships can make more out of low-end equipment than others. You should look out for these ships if you're lacking in equipment. Perhaps I'll make a video about ships that have low equipment requirement and ships with high equipment requirement in the future. That was a bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope you can take something away from it. The next question is, what can I replace X ship with? So for example, Nelson or Royal Oak. I now understand that when I say things like, replace Nelson with another flagship barrager, some people don't know what that means. What you need to learn is the role of each ship in a fleet, and then other ships that can fulfill the same role. This would take way too long to explain from beginning to end, but fortunately there is a written guide by Sam Hart 564, which I will link in the description. For now, I'll just give you a couple of quick examples. Nelson was used as an AoE barrager, meaning that she has a barrage which covers a huge area in order to deal a lot of damage to many enemies at once. In general, a ship with a consistent barrage that covers a large area will carry the damage output of your mob fleet. These barrages tend to come out straight in front of the ship, so they want the center position, also known as flagship, to cover the most amount of space, and they tend to be battleships that can intercept enemies coming from both the top and bottom lanes. You can see the barrages of ships from the Chinese wiki ship page, which I will link in the description. And while I'm at it, I'll show you what a couple of other flagship barrages look like. Let's take a look at Gascogne. As you can see, it comes out directly in front of her. Another example is Hood. Same idea. Once you understand what role each ship has in the fleet, you'll be able to choose alternatives that fulfill the same role without being told directly what to use. I'm making no promises about making a video explaining the roles, so do give Sam Hart's guide a read if you're interested. The next question is, why is my main fleet taking so much damage? The most common cause of this is not having enough damage. Dead enemies can't deal damage, so it could just be as simple as your fleet not being able to kill enemies in a reasonable amount of time, allowing them to open fire on your main fleet. Another possibility is that you just got unlucky. Perhaps one of your main fleet ships were set on fire. This is a relatively rare occurrence, which did happen once to Royal Oak in my last video, and when that happened, I had to restart the node and try again. Starting a fight without completing it only costs 1 oil per ship in the fleet, which means that for 6 oil per attempt, you can reset a node as many times as you want. Take advantage of this and don't just roll over when you get burned by chance. Another way you could be unlucky is if all the ramming caused by suicide ships and submarines just happen to damage one ship over and over again. This is also a good reason to reset the node so that one of your ships don't die while the other two are still full HP. You can also try experimenting with switching the positions of your top and bottom ship in the main fleet, which may or may not help. If you don't mind playing manual, you can leave one non-threatening enemy alive, such as a repair or anti-air boat, and wait for your airstrike and battleship cooldowns to be ready before spawning the next wave of enemies. The next question is, why is my vanguard taking so much damage? If you're using an evasion-based tank like a destroyer or most light cruisers, when your vanguard steps into an enemy flare, their evasion rate is reduced by 25%. Due to how evasion rate works, this is a huge hit to their survivability and could cause them to get nuked out of existence in the blink of an eye. You can combat this by using heavy or large cruiser tanks that rely more on HP and damage reduction, as well as just staying out of the flares if you play manual. Jarvis also seems to perform pretty consistently because she has a 40% evasion rate buff, which just completely cancels out the flare debuff. The next question is, why do you not like using Perseus? The only thing Perseus has over Unicorn is main fleet healing. I talked about the possible reasons that your main fleet is taking a lot of damage, and the main reason is because you're not killing enemies fast enough. Perseus does absolutely nothing to fix this issue as her damage is quite pathetic past the double preload and essentially non-existent when out of ammo. No amount of main fleet healing is going to out-heal the damage that the enemies in Chapter 14 will deal to your main fleet, which means that if you're using Unicorn and Perseus together, you're fighting an uphill battle and griefing yourself. If you have disagreed with anything I said here, then you're probably doing Chapter 14 just fine and don't need my help, so keep doing what you're doing. The next question is, what is the difference between 14.3 and 14.4? Aside from just the very slightly higher levels which barely make a difference, 14.4 has an ammo node, so when you're clearing the stage you don't have to deal with being out of ammo, making it actually easier than 14.3. The boss has medium armor, so you don't need to bring any HE guns at all. Otherwise, everything that goes in 14.3 also goes in 14.4. The last and final question is, all your ships are oathed. Is it even possible to beat Chapter 14 without being a whale? This is the type of question that makes me feel alive. I assume that your problem is that you don't have disposable income to spend on entertainment. My suggestion is that you make a YouTube channel and just complain about these problems, and hopefully like-minded people will flock to your channel and give you views. You can then use the money that you make from your YouTube channel to buy gems and oath rings, allowing you to ascend above the plebs, aka your viewers, and become a pay-to-win whale with every ship oathed. And those are all the questions that I saw. I hope that this video was able to help someone out there. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.